What is archetypal? Archetype is the standard of basic idea that every story has. Like how most of Disney stories are all about beautiful princess falling in love or being rescued by a charming prince. Archetype can be found in characters, setting, and even the plots. Mule archetype is the archetype that we are going to be talking about. Explanation of mule archetypal. Pattern of meal that usually define something like friendship or hidden emotion behind the prepared food. A communion. Every meal you eat, how you eat. Did you communicate with others that share the desk with you? What food are you eating? All of this has its own meaning, whether it's a direct expression or indirect expression. Here's a question to you. Why do you think in movies there's always a scene where the parents invite their daughter's boyfriend to eat with them? What do you think it means? Or why does the main protagonist invite another protagonist to eat with them? I think it just means that the family wants to know more about that guy. Correct, but also wrong. Nobody really knows the true meaning, but only the information based on the book. Maybe it does have its own message and we are just interpreting it incorrectly. The point is, it gives us a certain idea to help strengthen the plot and characteristics of the character and their motivation, whether it's a good interpretation or a bad interpretation. This will be our factor in analyzing plot and characters based on our point of view with the help of these meal. Like water for chocolate. This story is based on the Mexican Revolution during the 1910s to 1970s, where the main character Tita is the youngest daughter in De La Garza clan. According to their tradition, the youngest must not marry to anyone and instead be a servant to their parents until their death. Even though she was prevented from loving her soulmate, Pedro, Tita possesses this magical ability power to affect the food she made based on her emotion. The wedding ceremony. The guests at Tita's sister and Pedro's wedding just ate the cake and now they are vomiting all over the place. Normally, wedding feasts are supposed to be full of joy and unity between two families, but instead, full of sickness and guests vomiting all over the place. Tita was in charge of making the wedding cake and accidentally ruined the cake because of her power. When Tita was making the cake, Tita just experienced a very traumatized moment in which Pedro is marrying her sister and her mother is treating her like a slave in the kitchen. Tita's pain and suffering were soon transported into the food quality, thus affected the wedding cake once and for all. Now, this disastrous meal represents the act of revenge from Tita to everyone that caused her grief, even though this was an accident. Having a bad wedding feast is a bad omen in which the wedding moment was supposed to be fun and instead the opposite. This meal represents Tita's pain, suffering, and her angry towards others. Tita feeding the baby. The little nephew is crying out of hunger because the mother has no milk to feed the infant, and the infant was left with Tita. As a loving aunt, Tita tried to feed the baby with food in the kitchen, yet it doesn't work. Meanwhile, her breasts are full of firm milk enough to feed infants, so she does what she has to do. She feeds the baby, and this represents the love of mother to the child. Tita has this special relationship with the baby, and she treats the baby like her own child. Every meal has its own meaning, and this meal represents the love of mother from Tita to the infant nephew. With this knowledge, we are able to conclude that the baby and Tita has officially bonded and therefore thickened the plot. The baby now sees Tita as her own mother, while Tita sees this child as her own child. So this is why this meal represents meal archetypal. Why should we care? We should take precaution when we look at these novels with archetypal, for it helps us to understand the story because of its commonly used expression pattern throughout the scene that help understanding the story better. Mule archetype is important for it provides the meaning of mules in the stories and thus represents characters' motivation. We can apply this knowledge in the real world situation where you can be having a meal with people on whatever occasions, and you will know the meaning of the meal and reason for this meal when you look with meal archetypal lens, and thus react to the situation at hand with appropriate actions.